struggling to survive. One day I'll make it. I'm gonna wake up to dollar bills piling high. Stack it up, stack it up, stack it up, stack it up. Making that money, money, rain on me. Making that money, money, living that dream. Making that money, money, rain on me. Making that money, money, living that dream. I'm gonna love it when paper keeps coming. Nothing that I can't buy. When I finally lose count, there will be no doubt. I'll know that I've arrived. Stack it up, stack it up, stack it up, stack it up. Making that money, money, rain on me. Making that money, money, living that dream. Making that money, money, rain on me. Making that money, money, living that dream. Making that money, money. Making that money. Making that money, rain on me. Making that money, living that dream. Making that money, money, rain on me. Making that money, money, living that dream. Making that money, money, rain on me. Making that money, living that dream.
Ladies and gentlemen, this just in from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Media moguls Floyd Wonder are now the richest men in the world. That's right, forget about Carnegie, forget about Ford, forget about Rockefeller. Floyd Wonder has the Midas touch. Sources say they're worth millions, some say billions. Look out, folks, here they come.
I don't really care, I'ma be a millionaire. Like, I don't really care, I'ma be a millionaire. Like, I don't really care, I'ma be a millionaire. Like,
Signs, motherfucking, I don't really care what you thinking. It's so pretty, looking as high as a pheasant. Got the feathers dripping all around me. Wearing designer in my Gucci Ghost slides, rocks telling the time with my clock, look at ice. I'm so pretty, I'm a divine motherfucking god. Everybody wanna know me. I swear, baby.
I don't really care, I'ma be a billionaire. Like, I don't really care, I'ma be a billionaire. Like, I don't really care, I'ma be a billionaire. Like, I don't really care, I'ma be a trillionaire. Like, I don't really care, I'ma be a trillionaire. Like, I don't really care, I'ma be a trillionaire. Like, look at me, I'm about to be rich. Look at me, I'm about to be rich. I'm about to be rich. Oh, DJ, play it again, like.
to prove myself. Take the wheel, hit the gas, gonna raise some hell. Gonna know my name, gonna hear me yell. Nothing holding me back far as I can tell. Can't stop me now. Can't hold me down. Can't stop me. I've been waiting for the chance to prove myself. Take the wheel, hit the gas, gonna raise some hell. Gonna know my name, gonna hear me yell. Nothing holding me back far as I can tell.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Carpet Python TV. That was actually pretty good. That went down without a glitch. I'm not used to that, so I was a little bit stuck now, lost for words. So welcome tonight. We've got another show on with Colin Schumacher, my wingman. And we have a privilege of having Shane Simpson on the show tonight. Shane's a reptile veterinarian down in Victoria that sort of specializes in... let me just close all this music that's going on in the background. Hang on. There we go. Sorry. So Shane specializes in reptile and reptile medicine, and he's been around for a while. So I thought, what better time would it, especially now with the COVID-19 situation, to have a veterinarian on here, and we can have a little bit of a chat about current situations of different diseases in Australian collections, and let's jump over to Shane. Good evening, everybody. Oh, where's the sound gone? Hang on. Oh, my goodness. Sorry. There we go. Sorry. I took the...
We're back.
I knew that there's always some fader that that I forget to put up, and I'm just on a roll, you know. So, good evening, Colin. Good evening, Shane. Welcome on the show.
Thanks, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I hope we can. I know it's it's there's quite a bit to cover, and it's always a hard topic to keep the crowd happy, and so that there's a lot of questions, and I want to try and keep it on track tonight, sort of along not just go off tangent. So I think where we'll start is to just give people, for those of you that don't know who you are and what you do and where you're based, can you just give us a little bit of a background of who you are, Shane?
Yeah. So I am from Melbourne. Graduated from the University of Queensland in 1996. So I did 2 years of zoology at University of Melbourne, and moved to Brisbane to go to vet school. Yep. Graduated up there, and 4 days later started working at Kringle Veterinary Hospital, which is based here in Frankston.
Yeah.
And have been there ever since. So I think it's nearly 25 years. What's that? 25 years. Yeah. And started off there as an associate vet, just playing with dogs and cats. But I always had an interest in exotic pets, and particularly reptiles and amphibians. Yeah. And so I was sort of lucky enough that I landed on my feet there, and my employer, who is now my business partner in the practice, sort of allowed me to develop the reptile side of things. And even that was sort of, I got into that accidentally. I had some green tree frogs in the waiting room, and a client of mine offered me her bearded dragons, and I put them in the waiting room, and the rest is history. I went from seeing one reptile every sort of couple of months to, when we were fully going, myself and I had an associate working for me at the time, we were seeing up to 100 cases a week. Still do. But it built up very, very quickly. And I think that was because there wasn't many of us around that were interested in it. And, I'll be honest, I didn't know much what I was doing back then, but sort of hit the books, and people like yourself let me experiment a bit and that sort of stuff. And I think it was just a case of people really appreciated that there was a vet who had an interest in it, and was willing to do the background work and worked it up from there. So now it's I've been lucky enough that I've been able to move that reptile part of what was in Kringlebed Hospital. Is I've now opened a separate clinic called the Unusual Pet Vets, which is literally 200 metres down the road. So I'm lucky enough I can walk between the two.
Tell me just that. Do you think so? You think that the specializing was a good business move for you guys?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So we were doing a good number from a business point of view, a good number of dollars per month just in reptiles, and I really wasn't doing a lot of bird stuff or rabbits, and ferrets, and those sort of things. Since we've moved the exotics component out of Kringle into the separate practice, and I've teamed up with James Haberfield and Hamish Barron, who some of the listeners will know their names. We've actually increased our caseload and our income from a practice point of view 5 times above what we were doing. So it's just, it's been phenomenal. And that's we opened in the new practice in September 2018. So in a fairly short space of time, we've gone from a very busy practice to just crazy. And so we've got 4 vets working through the clinic.
I missed that. Which year did you specialize down there? Which year did you
So we opened Unusual Pet Vets September 2018. So, and I'd been doing reptiles. I probably really got into the reptiles, I'm going to say early 2000s. And so I had a very large caseload that I was able to bring with me into the new business. And that formed a really good platform. From there, we could, as I mentioned Hamish before, so Hamish is one of 7 bird specialists in the country. So we then were able to bring in the bird guys. And so we've been able to increase that caseload incredibly. And then James does a lot of rabbits and ferrets and small mammals. And, so it's been educational. My experience, my knowledge of it with rabbits and other things other than reptiles and amphibians has increased exponentially. It's been fantastic.
It was, I've known James since, he was one of the first kids. His dad actually.
Yes,
it was one of the first guys I met in Melbourne when I got here, and they such a good family, such nice guys. Like I went there the first time and they took me and showed me all their stuff, and consistently good breeders as well. And I just I know he was over in WA, in his early days with the thing, and I think it was such a good move. Like I've been following your progress as well over the years, with dealing with the snakes and stuff, and now with Unusual Pet Vets, and you get the good stuff, and there's no way that the business won't grow.
That's exactly right. And we've had so we in September last year opened up our practice in Brisbane. So we were lucky enough that a friend of mine, Josh Linus, who many people know as the Herp Vet up there, he's a good mate of mine, and he came to me one day and said, would you be interested in opening an Unusual Pet Vets in Brisbane? So we all sort of flew up, had a bit of a chat, and worked out this was a good business model. And so now we've got a team up there as well. So we've now got the 2 practices in Perth, one here in Melbourne and one in Brisbane, and who knows where the next one's going to be. So
you're the McDonald's of the veterinary world.
Well, trying to.
If it works for that, if that's a recipe that works, why not?
Yeah, it's exactly right. And we do try and replicate what it is, but it's actually very good because each of us has, the guys in Perth as well. All of us have our own sort of special interests, and just in our practices, obviously I do the mammals and the birds, but we all see each other. But like we can bounce ideas off each other, and it's actually a really good environment to work with. And so I'm working part time there, and I'm still doing a couple of days a week up at the dog and cat clinic, but I'm slowly phasing myself out of that. So
of course you would. Of course you would be. If you laid the foundation like that, of course you can have a little bit more downtime. Tell me,
that's right.
You classified as an essential service, I assume?
Yeah. So we've been flat out, hasn't changed anything as far as business hours. We're not working Sundays or anything like that anymore. But I guess the hardest bit, like today where it was pouring rain, none of our clients in both of our practices, none of the clients are allowed into the clinic. So we're actually going out to the car park, talking to them in their car, and then bringing them in. And the problem is you get pouring rain like today, and you're standing out there under an umbrella, hanging onto this big drag and trying to keep it warm. So,
and I'm sure you've got your face masks on and all that stuff.
We haven't ever put those on. We sort of just stand back from the car and do the social distancing side of things. So it hasn't been too hard. It's actually quite difficult to talk to people
with mask on. Yeah.
So it's actually, and look, it's been fantastic. Our clients have been really understanding with it.
I can't think that I've ever spoken to you and they've actually spit come in my face, so
No,
you're good.
no.
You're a good talker, It's
Yeah,
it's
I'm
those
good.
ones. It's those ones where you can see the fountains of spit come out that you have to worry about.
Yeah, you haven't really got me pissed off or angry enough that I'm actually like.
Somebody said, who said that? There's a comment there saying Shane got the George Clooney head tonight. So I take that as a tip. Definitely take that as a tip. It was
Marty said that.
Marty Buagia. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
that'd be right.
So I'm sure.
Smart ass.
I'm sure you know the majority of the the bigger guys down in Victoria, and you specialize. The fact that you specialize. I mean, I remember early days. I used to see Brendan Carmel a few times, and there was somebody down in. Is it Burwood? The Burwood vet. There's a vet down in.
The bird vet in Burwood. So
Yes.
Pat McWhirter and Phil Sachs Phil's still there. So Pat's moved on to another clinic now. So there's a few around. So Brendan's still there.
Do you go on a lot of you do a lot of attend a lot of conferences and stuff all over the world as well? And have you seen an interest in general with veterinarians specializing in that topic? I know you said that you don't necessarily. There's no specialist in that in Australia in reptiles.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
But have you found that younger veterinarians coming through school now are looking at reptiles a little bit more serious for a living or to specialize in?
Yeah. Well, so when I graduated in '96, I went through 7 years of university with one lecture on reptile medicine. I graduated with, and these days now there's whole exotics departments within the universities. Like Melbourne University's just built a whole new exotics department. It's fantastic. And I call them kids. I'm old enough to call them kids now. The kids that are graduating or are coming through university, we're booked out 2 years in advance for students to come and do rotations with us to spend 3 weeks with us. And that's not just the students from Australia. We get students from all over the world. Like literally now, other than the virus stopping them coming, we're supposed to have a student from the Czech Republic with us for the next month. Well, unfortunately, she's not coming, but we get students from everywhere. And there's now a number of exotics only clinics in Australia. There is business, there is employment opportunities for people to go and actually work in just those. We're probably still a way off from having a reptile specific clinic. But a third of our business is reptiles, so it's a significant component of the business side of things. So it's been good.
I think the fact that you guys have a pretty strong social media presence. I know you guys push that a lot, and I see all your I scroll, stalk the internet quite often, like most of us do. But that's definitely one of the pages I go to at least once a week to go and just see, because the case studies that you do a proper breakdown of the case studies. What I appreciate about your social media is that you put information with the images of the different, so people can read it and actually understand what you guys went through the process of fixing an animal. And a lot of people don't do that, I think nowadays people like to just put a picture up and let people guess, and a lot of times there's more to learn from, because somebody might have a snake at home that has that swelling, mid-body swelling, that sees what you guys are doing and the explanation, and then that urges them to bring the snake in to get checked up, especially with cancers and stuff. I know that's that's the stuff that is far more. I think it's becoming far more regular to see those things on the internet, and people don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, that and I think I think reptile ownership is massively increased. So there's a lot more people out there that own them. So therefore, the number of cases that you see of those sort of things is certainly going to increase. And secondly, people are more willing to actually spend the money and take their animal to the vet type sort of thing. And thirdly, there's more vets like myself that are trained and know what we're looking at. And so, when you get those sort of three things all pointing in the same direction, then it changes. But, with the social media side of things, we are very conscious of that. And I like to think we probably do it better than any other exotics clinic in the country. And we have a fairly structured program of how we do it. And, we have a case each day, and the vets from all over the country that work for us it's actually part of their performance appraisal system and that sort of stuff. We look at how many cases they've actually put up online, and we have a marketing manager that works for us that controls all that and looks after all that and makes sure the spelling's right and that sort of stuff. And and I think it shows. I think we do a really good job with it. So and it's education, but the main drive of our page is yes, it's to bring in business, but it's educating people on what is going on, so that they, exactly as you say, they may have an animal is doing exactly the same thing, and they can bring it in.
But it is part of the evolution of communication between. I mean, a lot of it cuts out a lot of the consultation side of things as well. If somebody comes in and he's got some form of idea as well, so you sort of know where to, they've seen something online that looks similar to what they're dealing with. And it narrows it down a bit, so it's a double-edged sword. You can it's not just about promoting the business, it's about people figuring out stuff as well.
And the flip side of that too, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that's part of what we're also trying to combat. And we'll get people will argue with us or make comments on our Facebook page, and I like to come back with them and bury them in science. And so,
tell me something.
It's educational.
So, what do you think about the COVID-19? Do you think it's real or fake?
Oh, it's definitely real. There's no two ways about that. So, I actually, funny stories. I know a veterinarian who published a PhD about 15 years ago. In that PhD, and it was all about
that coronavirus,
transmission of viruses from animals to people. And in that PhD, she actually has a paragraph. She sent it out and highlighted it, that said, in the next 15, 20 years, we will have a pandemic that originates from China, and it will come from bats.
I saw that.
She absolutely was spot on with what she said.
But I saw that, and I thought it was fake news. Now, that's credible from Shane's mouth. It's been. Don't believe any of the shit you see on online anymore. Shane's has definitely verified that is definitely it exists. That's good. I saw that. I saw that. Sorry, Shane.
You said a lot of one of my mates up here is an RSPCA. He works at the RSPCA, and a lot of people are dumping their dogs and animals off because they think they're going to get coronavirus. Have you had the same with like unusual pets at all? Or?
No, not really. Probably the only one that we've had issues with is, and not so much issues, but more questions about, is ferrets, because ferrets have the potential of actually catching COVID-19. So ferrets, they were part of, so COVID-19, coronavirus, everybody calls it, is very closely related to SARS virus, which hit a couple of years ago. And SARS virus, ferrets were used in the medical testing and that sort of stuff, so that they were models for human medicine for SARS virus, and so they were shown to carry it. And SARS virus and coronavirus are very closely related, and so I'll guarantee there are labs in the world using ferrets as human models for vaccine trials and things like that. And so, and so potentially a ferret could catch COVID and potentially give it to people. Hasn't happened, and it hasn't been proven. But of all the species that we have that we deal with in a domestic situation, they're the ones that most likely are the ones that are going to have it. So if we get a ferret in at the moment that's showing respiratory signs, we're full mask, full protective equipment.
So that virus can jump species.
Potentially. Well, SARS virus was shown, and it does. With coronavirus, certainly there are reported cases of dogs and cats in a couple of countries, Hong Kong, US. In the US this week, I think there was a dog that's been diagnosed with, I'm going to say it was New York City.
It was in New York,
Tigers have been shown that they've actually got some problems. The Bronx Zoo has got tigers that have been infected.
So it could be that, not that we want to stir the pot now, but it could be that this can jump, this could jump the species barrier and then be floating around and then jump back.
It came from bats to people. Whether the people can then infect. It has been shown that people can then infect animals.
Animals.
Tigers. That whether it then can come back into the human population, who knows? So this is
crazy.
Lots of it is. It's crazy and it's scary too. To think what can actually happen.
There goes my aspirations of being a ferret breeder. It's gone.
I don't bring that shit there. Don't bring them near me. I just don't like little predatory mammals. I just don't know. It's like, I can handle the worst, biggest reptile, but don't bring mammals with their beady little eyes. Horses. I don't know. Horses freak me out as well. Sheep with those eyes. It's weird. It's weird.
I'd rather deal with an inland taipan any day of the week than a little ferret, that angry ferret.
So there's somebody else. Somebody said, what is
Shane's most viewed YouTube video? That's from Adam.
Adam Sapiano. Yeah.
That'd be Adam Sapiano's video. That'd be he's trying to blow his own trumpet here.
What was on the video?
That was an intestinal abscess / possible tumor that I took out of one of Adam's black-headed pythons years ago now. And I haven't actually looked at how many views it's had, but it'd be probably up to 500,000, I think. So it's
talking about the blackhead abscess. Was it what type of? Because somebody mentioned earlier that Jim Greenwood used to be in Burwood as well. What was Jim Green?
That's right. He was in Canterbury. That's right. So Jim's retired. He was in Canterbury.
Yeah, Canterbury. Years ago, I took a blackhead there to him as well. That had it was one of the I've had some wicked veterinarian bills in my life. You would know. I remember.
Ferrari outside is
yeah, of course. That set up your new clinic.
That's right.
But he cut out the one of those abdominal abscesses out of a blackhead, and they don't make it. What's the recovery rate of those? What are those abscesses called that they find right in there? You've cut open a few. What are their recovery rates for those?
In 99.9% of the cases, that's actually a type of cancer that starts off a thing called an intestinal carcinoma. It's basically the equivalent of human bowel cancer.
Yeah,
snakes get bowel cancer, and what happens is they ulcerate on the inside surface of the intestine, and they get abscessed. And so it's not really until they get an infection or the abscess in there that you get that external swelling that people then actually see.
Yeah.
Now the problem with bowel cancer is in people, bowel cancer in snakes is it spreads to the liver. And so if you get onto it early and you can remove that tumor, get the intestine back together, and it's happened, and you get that out before it spread, then they do fine. And I've certainly had animals that we've done the surgery on and they've done fine. But if at the time that cancer is removed, it's already spread to the liver, there's nothing we can do. So in a lot of these cases now, we'll ultrasound the liver and make sure there's no lumps in the liver that we can see, and then go in surgically and take them out. But I did one, I'm going to say 3 or 4 weeks ago, on a big albino Darwin, and it's recovered well. Whether it goes on and survives longer term, who knows?
Have you found are you guys okay? Can you guys, am I still in sync? Like, I know there's a little bit of lag with the sound and stuff, but is my video feed okay on your side?
It's fine,
yeah. I don't know what's going on tonight. We've got no drop frames. Yeah, I'm worried watching the tech here as well. And now a question for you. A lot of people always ask. Now, you mentioned that you've had an albino with that. Do you find that mutants are more prone to ailments and things like cancer? Is that something that you've picked up in the number of cases that you had, or what do you think?
No, certainly not in the snakes. So the all the morphs and that sort of stuff are just as predisposed to any of these things that any of the animals see. To be honest, I reckon probably the single weakest, if I can put it in inverted commas, animals that I've seen would be the hypermelanistic blue-tongue lizards. They are just not strong animals. They suffer a lot from respiratory disease.
Is that the hypermelon, the black ones?
Yeah. So they're just not strong. Whereas the albino carpets, that sort of stuff, never really seen any issues with those. They're normal. And people go on about their eyesight and that sort of stuff with albinos particularly, and those sort of things. But I haven't seen much of an issue with it. I think they're all pretty much the same. But the black blue tongues, they're the ones that whenever I get someone bringing in one of those, I go, here we go. It's going to be a little thing with respiratory disease. Classically, it's they've bought it and they've only had it a week. It's got shipped down to them or wherever they've got it from, and arrives sick or the stress of travel knocks it around.
You get your bad news pants on and you walk out. So you get ready to give them the bad news, But
I haven't even seen the animal yet.
But that's something that Colin said to me as well, because I was thinking that I've keep a few blueies now. under the circumstances, you know, to
Yep.
just keep me entertained while time moves on.
Yep.
But Colin said to me, you've also seen that with hypermelanistic blue tongues, that they just one day just roll over and, you know.
A large collection of blue tongues, your black ones will always have problems.
Yeah.
That's what I found anyway. So
Yeah.
That's
I agree.
very odd. Yeah. So, okay, we've talked about the cancers. How common are these cancers and those that, you know, carcinoma? How often are they? How often do you see that? And say like, what's a sort of percentage wise? Do you diagnose
Look,
those?
they're not. I wouldn't say they're super common, but they're common enough that you get a snake and you go, that's what this is.
Yeah.
I think the cancer in general, it was sort of thought for many years incorrectly that reptiles didn't get cancer, but that's been completely proven wrong. And what we in the veterinary industry knew that was wrong, but the keepers out there sort of felt that they just didn't see cancer in reptiles. Well, that's not right. We certainly see it across all the different species and all the different types of cancers. We've had some really crazy, things like tongue cancer in lace monitors and just weird stuff. And so I don't think it's a fact that it's an increasing thing. I think it's just that there's more reptiles out there that are being kept. So as the population of those increase, the number of cases increase. And so, we see, on a weekly basis, we would see a couple of reptiles and amphibians, and not so much you get the occasional cancer in the amphibians, but the reptiles you'll get a couple of cases, every week. It's pretty common.
Do you think it's do you think it can be tracked back to husbandry?
I think sometimes, and there's things like bearded dragons, for example, are prone to a type of cancer called squamous cell carcinoma. It's a skin cancer people get, and we see it on the eyelids of bearded dragons.
Okay.
And there's some thought that maybe the UV lights, because the squamous cell carcinoma in people is related to the UV exposure and sun damage. And so there's this theory that maybe bearded dragons they get it because they're exposed to high intensity UV light. Yet other species that are kept in exactly the same conditions, like water dragons, never see it. You don't see it. So is there a genetic component to bearded dragons, for example, that make them prone to this particular cancer?
Yeah, somebody
who knows?
Somebody actually asked here, Cookies Critters asked, is cancer in reptiles hereditary? Is there any data to claim higher risk for offspring?
Not that I'm aware of. And there's quite a few publications that have been done looking at cancer in reptiles. Most of them are looking at particularly big labs in the US. They'll do what's called a retrospective study. So they'll go back and look at all their cancer cases for 10 years and then produce a document that says, well, we saw these number of animals and that sort of stuff. From a hereditary point of view, I can't think of a case in my practice where I've seen that we think that it passes down the lines. It's not like where in some dog breeds, for example, there are certain cancers that seem to happen in dog breeds. I just don't think we've got the animal numbers and the time
and the money
for that to happen to happen in reptiles. I certainly wouldn't rule it out. You were talking about blackheaders and intestinal cancer. We do see blackheaders with intestinal cancer and diamond pythons. Those two seem to be more common. Whether that's hereditary or whether it's just genetically that's what these animals get, I don't know. But time will tell.
There is something interesting that I can add to that. When I was doing all the beardies, remember the time I swapped over T5? I mean, we're going back years ago when T5s really took off. I always had the translucent bearded dragons under the T8 style, old style thick tubes. And I never had issues with that. And then I changed over to the Arcadia and to the, went through Arcadia, then I changed to Zoomed or whatever. And I did find that this whole idea that they should be beaten down for 8 hours with UV light is it's completely wrong. I had better success just running T5s for like an hour in the morning and an hour at night. Remember, we had some long conversations about, the amount of time the microwatts per per hour.
Yeah.
You know, so if you can't just and then you need to offer them a area to go and hide away from. You know, like
Correct.
they need to be able to get away from it. It's like being out in the sun on the beach. You
Yeah,
don't do that
yeah.
for 8 hours
No, you
solid.
don't.
You'd
Yeah,
be dead.
and that's people talk about thermal gradient, about having a hot end and a cold end type sort of thing. But we also need to think about UV gradient.
Yeah.
And having the ability that animals can actually regulate their exposure to UV light and be able to get out of UV light. And beardies are a classic example. Is if you look at what bearded dragons do in the wild, they don't sit out and bask in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
They're in the shrubs, they're in the trees. And exactly, in the morning and at night, dusk, they're actually basking. And so I think we really need to have a real think about how we actually keep a lot of these animals in captivity because of, and looking more at what they're doing in the wild and trying to replicate that in captivity. So, but I agree, having them, under 12 hours of high intensity UV light is probably not a good thing for them, and particularly when they can't get out of it and protect themselves. But whether that leads to any problems cancer-wise, who knows?
But you know what? It's almost like our the knowledge was sort of got stuck at some point, and the equipment just advanced. Like under,
Yes.
I can imagine. I used to keep them in those boa, those big plastic tubs. So at that specific height, I think you could run a T8 tube for 8 hours because they could move away from it and they could get closer. But as soon as you put a reflector and a T5, it's like a quadruple the amount of UV that gets pumped out of those things. So I think where we had an issue is the books always told us, they need UV and you put a fluorescent tube in there, but it didn't take the information didn't change with the advancements in technology.
The advancement technology. The other thing is that the different types of caging. If you've got a tub that's 40 centimeters deep, the light that you can use on that is very different to what you can have on an enclosure that's 70 centimeters high with a wire top on it.
Yeah.
And so one globe does not fit everybody in every situation. And so, when I'm talking to people in the clinic about their husbandry, that sort of stuff, and I ask them what globe they've got, you also have to ask them what's your enclosure setup, because you've got to match the globes and the output and the setup with the species that's in there. It's not just a case of going and buying this particular tank is going to suit a beardy, it's going to suit a blue tongue, a frilly or whatever. It's very different. And then you get into the whole thing about UV and snakes. That's a whole.
Somebody, it's amazing. Our conversation has been moving exactly where people are asking the questions as we are talking about it. Somebody asked us just before about UV light, because UV is one of
Shane's thoughts on UV light and large monitors and crocodiles.
Yeah.
From Adam again.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. They need it.
Yeah,
that would be my response. Yeah, for years I had people say monitors don't get metabolic bone disease. That's rubbish. They absolutely get metabolic bone disease. I've had some lace monitors in with heads you could literally bend in half. So they definitely have it. And you just got to look at the natural behaviour of a crocodile sitting out in the sun basking.
And they sit there for hours. But also they have an ability to go and submerge themselves away from UV if it becomes too much. I think it needs to be a little bit, common sense is a rarity these days as well, So, I mean, but there is enough. I know there's a few reptile groups. I mean, there's a reptile lighting specialist. There's a few groups that I can highly recommend. There's reptile lighting groups, Fran Baines, the woman that did all the testing. There are groups. You just need to find them. You don't need to be you don't need to be a member of hundreds of groups. You just need to find the right groups to get the right answers, And there's a lot of guys, a lot of the older keepers are cluey enough that if you shoot them a message, they will answer, they will help you. And I mean, I've never had any situation where you weren't willing to help me out with a phone, with a phone call in the past, so there are there are veterinarians that are willing to have a quick chat. I know you a little bit longer now than the people. I know you. I've known you for a long time. So I mean, you probably don't have that. You probably don't have the relationship with everybody and have time for all of that.
I'm going to have 150 people ringing me.
You can see I sort of put the information out now. I'm sort of backpedaling.
Just throw the bomb. It's all right.
There you go, Shane.
But that does raise a good point. Is building relationship. What I struggle sometimes as a vet is people ringing up, and they've seen my stuff on Facebook or they've listened to this show and that sort of stuff, and all of a sudden they're my best mate. And they want all this free advice and help and that sort of stuff. Hang on a second, you've never brought animals into me. It works both ways, and so you get these emails that say, oh, I need your help type sort of thing, and you think, well, hang on a second, you've had the opportunity to bring in animals, let us check them up beforehand and that sort of stuff, and you haven't, and now you want help. Sort of go, okay, well,
it's a fine line.
Yes,
it's a very fine line. I know it's like people buying snakes from somebody, asking you to help them with the snake they bought from somebody else, and most of the time, you feel sorry for, especially if it's a newbie, if it's a first snake owner, and they got given the wrong information. That's always a hard one to sort of dismiss and say, look, but you should have done your research. That's an easy scapegoat. It's easy to get out of that by saying something like that. But on the other side, we all start somewhere.
Absolutely.
Any questions there, Colin, that you want to?
I'm just so people that they're asking questions, I'm copying and pasting them so we can come back to them.
Yeah. So these so somebody
we got one from Aaron Carney.
Yeah.
Hi guys. So what type of cancer are you seeing as the most prevalent throughout python species, and what should we really look for? That sounds like free advice.
Oh, yeah, all right. Who actually am I sending the bill to this?
Colin.
Sending my email address to nowhere.
The Neefs never bloody pays me, so it's...
listen to that. Whatever. I'll remember that.
Okay, so cancer that we see prevalent across the species... we're talking about the intestinal carcinomas in snakes. That's definitely one.
Yeah.
We certainly see things like in bearded dragons, the squamous cell carcinomas in the eye.
Yeah.
We see a lot of another type of we call a soft tissue sarcoma, so a cancer of muscle and connective. We see a lot of those in bearded dragons. See some of those in some of the smaller monitors, like the spiny tails. They seem to be more prone to it.
Yeah.
We certainly see melanomas. That's another cancer that we get. And that's again in bearded dragons, but also diamond pythons seem to be a bit more prone to those.
Yeah.
And there are some weirder type sort of cancers, but I would suggest probably the most common one in snakes as a group of cancers is gastrointestinal cancer.
Okay.
Whether it be stomach or intestine, and in bearded dragons, certainly skin and muscle type sort of. Lizards would be skin and muscle type sort of cancers. They're by far the most common.
Okay. There's somebody asked
There
you.
you go, Aaron. Boom.
What causes neurological? Okay, so we won't go into JAGs and stuff like that. So I'm assuming
Josh Vanessa, what causes neurological disorders in snakes, and why worse in some than others experiencing the same problem?
Yeah, well, I guess we won't go into too much on this, but the JAG situation I think has improved over the years.
Yeah.
Certainly when JAGs first sort of hit the market. We were seeing lots of really severe neurologically affected snakes. And I think I know that's improved over the years. And I think that's just really an indication of better breeding, that sort of stuff. What actually causes that has always been a little bit debatable, but the theory with it is that there's what's called neural crest tissue in the brain that doesn't form properly because of the reduced melanin in the brain. I actually have never seen anything published scientifically that validates that. And if anybody has seen that, I'd love to read it, but I haven't seen it. But that was the theory. And whether that was true or not, I don't know. But it certainly seems to have improved over the years with JAGs. And most of the JAGs we get in now don't have the horrible twisting and neurological problems. As far as other causes, we get toxicities, people with mite treatments, using those inappropriately will get neurological problems with that. Virus is a big one. That's by far the biggest type one. And then there's a whole group of things that we just don't know what causes you get these animals coming in with neurological problems. And you can do all the testing under the sun. Yeah. And we've got absolutely no idea. And it's not until you get a brain out and send it off pathology, you might find something to indicate, well, this might have been a cause. But, whether it is vitamin problems or mineral problems, there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know yet. So, but viruses would be the big one for me from a neurological point of view.
With so moving into this this viruses and stuff, because
we've got one more question.
Just go.
UV one, which is good from Mitch
last
and James.
Last UV one. Yep.
Last UV one. Is there any proven link between UV and color development?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of any. I will say that animals that are provided with UV appropriately seem to look better. I've certainly seen. Jungle carpets are a really good example of that. I've certainly seen some very dull ones that, when they've actually been put under appropriate lighting and gone through shed cycles, seem to look a lot more vibrant and a lot healthier. So that's just my own personal experience. But I'm not aware of any published information that says that it improves colour.
Yeah.
They just look better, and I think they also look better because you've got proper wavelength of light on them. So to us, they actually physically look better.
And you would know because you've got a book as well. You wrote a book, you know.
I've got a couple of books, a couple of chapters. I'm actually working on another one at the moment. I got roped into writing another bloody chapter.
Maybe just give yourself a quick plug about that book, because that's because people might want to know, because I'm a big you recommended books to me in the past, the reptile medicine and surgery, I highly recommend that book. But you've got but was the big fat Douglas Matter book,
Douglas Matter's book, So he's now handed over the editorship. I guess that's a word to very well-known reptile veterinarians, and Steve Divers and Scott Stahl. They published late last year was the updated version of Matter's Reptile Medicine and Surgery. So so that was the first. That was the new one is the third edition, and that's 15 years after the first one. So in that 15 years, you can imagine the information that's actually improved.
But was that the one that you spoke to me about when I saw you the last time, maybe 2-3 years ago?
Yeah.
Was that the one? Yeah. Okay, because I thought that was okay. I might have to get that one.
Yeah, it's a new version. So there's now 3 editions of Matter's Reptile Medicine and Surgery, and so the newest one's a big thick green book about 1,500 pages. Okay. And I was lucky enough to be asked to write 3 chapters or rewrite and co-write 3 chapters in that textbook, and I predominantly did the lizard section.
And I'm assuming you would highly recommend that for anybody. I mean, what I really liked about the first, but about the second edition, I had the first and the second edition, was that it was written in a way that not necessarily layman could understand.
Yeah.
Could read it. It wasn't it wasn't full on veterinarian talk. It wasn't full on. So you would be able to get that book and sort of. A lot of people don't know where you go into the back of the book. You find the keywords, and you get cross-reference back into the book, But I found that book really easy to read. Some things were a little bit above, but you get the general idea of what's going on. So I highly recommend that book.
Yeah, and the new edition's probably even better that way, because it's now got, I reckon probably the back third of it is actually just 1 or 2 pages summarising the common conditions. So things like metabolic bone disease or nutritional secondary hypoparathyroidism, as it should be known. But it's got a 2-page little summary of what the symptoms are, how to diagnose it, what treatment, that sort of stuff. And so, but further back in the front, towards the front of the book, is 100 pages on the pathophysiology and all the stuff that we as vets kind of need to know. So it's still a veterinary textbook, and it's aimed at vets, but it's for the serious keepers out there, that's the sort of textbook that you probably want to have. It's not cheap. It's
but it's an investment. It's one of those things that you have. If you are serious about reptiles and you're serious about your collection, you have to have a decent medicine book. It is as simple as that. If you don't have one, then you get stuck. That's when you start getting contacting many people, and many people's opinions don't make the right answer. You'll have a very good idea from reading a veterinarian handbook what's going on. And
the benefit from a book like that too is that it's what's called peer reviewed. So, I wrote the 3 chapters. That then gets sent into the editors, who then send it out to multiple people to actually review the content of that. And make sure that what is being written and published is correct. And all the references that are in that book, and there are literally thousands of them, is all based on published data from scientific investigation. It's not just hearsay and I saw this type of thing. It actually has to be published. And we, as authors, we were given very strict instructions that we had to find scientific papers published that actually verified what we were writing in the chapters. And so it was a good 12 months worth of work getting the chapters written. And but there's a lot of information in there. And the problem too is that it takes a long time to get a book published, and by the time some of that's published, you've got even more new information that's been published since. So so it's
Okay.
it's,
Just a last question about the book, the name of it, and where can people find it, Shane?
Yeah, so it's now called Mader's Reptile Medicine and Surgery, and I think probably the easiest place to get it is places like Amazon and
Book Depository,
online book, the Book Depository, and that sort of stuff. I think I got mine from I got one of my copies. One of the perks of one of the authors is you get a free copy, so I got my free copy. But
you wouldn't be doing that if you didn't get a free copy.
I want to get something out of it. So, but most of the big online booksellers will definitely sell it.
All right. Okay. So let's jump into the serious stuff here. Now, we've had, over the last, I have to say, over the last 10 years, we've seen either we've become aware of viruses in large collections in Australia. Mm-hmm. They've either been there always, and we just didn't know how to test it. I mean, I think that might have been the case. It was always there. We didn't have the tools to know that they're there. Now, can you give us an update? I know there's, you've talked extensively on sunshine virus. You've talked extensively on Borna virus, all the major snake killing diseases. That you don't want into collection. Can you give us just a rough idea, just run over them, just sunshine virus, how to, if you think you have it, if somebody, how do you distinguish one of the big viruses, how do you distinguish that from just a common cold? What's the procedure? What should you do if you suddenly come down with a snake that's sick in summer? What's the protocols and what do you need to look for?
Yeah, so part of that is knowing what viruses are out there. So you mentioned a couple there. So sunshine virus is probably the one that I think most people are probably aware of because it was a big thing in sort of 10, 12 years ago. Borna virus was also something that came out and is still around, that sort of stuff. We've also got things like what many people will know as OPMV, which is now correctly called Furler virus. Now, we don't have that in Australia, but that was the big one. That was kind of the big starting one that people were worried about. Yeah. And then we had inclusion body disease, as it was then called, now known to be caused by a group of viruses called arena viruses. Yeah. And then the latest one that we've got is the Nido or Nido viruses, depending on what country you come from and how they're pronouncing it. So they're the big ones. Now, you can pretty much classify those viruses into two groups. There are groups that are neurological viruses, and then there are groups that are respiratory viruses, and then there's a couple of them that do cause both. And so things like sunshine viruses is a neurorespiratory virus. Those snakes that are affected by that they'll do that classic stargazing where they put their head back and go back and head tilts and they'll get respiratory, the classic RI symptoms of bubbles and wheezes and crackles. Borna virus is pretty much a neurological virus, but it looks exactly the same as sunshine virus other than the respiratory signs. So you can't look at a snake and say, a neurological snake and say it's got sunshine virus or it's got Borna virus. You just physically can't do that. Yeah. Arena virus, again, we don't. There are reported cases of it in Australia, but we're lucky that we don't really have it. It's in was in one zoological collection, but isn't in the general collection and keepers' collections now. But certainly in the US and Europe, it's a problem. Yeah. It's also a neurological virus, and it looks exactly the same as sunshine virus, and so that's another one. And then Nido virus, again, depending on where you are in the world, will depend on how serious that is. There are nidoviruses in certain species of snakes that kill snakes with severe respiratory disease. And then there's the nidovirus that we have in the country here in Australia that basically causes mild respiratory sort of symptoms. And so, so you're really looking for respiratory and you're looking for neurological. And the next question then becomes have you got a new animal into the collection? Do you practice good quarantine? If you're a single snake owner and you've had that snake for 10 years and it's never had any problems and it suddenly develops a bit of a respiratory infection, it's probably not going to be a virus because it would have shown symptoms before that type of thing. But if you're a large breeder who's got animals coming in and out all the time because of breeding and that sort of stuff, and you've got animals, a number of animals coming in sick, that's a problem. And so how, as a clinician, how I treat those is very different. So part of it's, a big part of it's actually getting the history from the client. Where did the animal come from? Where, how long have you had it? What species is it? Where, who was it from? Is often a big one. And when you've been around as long as I have, you sort of get to know the people in the
channel,
industry. And so there's all that sort of those questions, but. But looking for those neurological symptoms and looking for respiratory symptoms, they're the two big ones that we look for.
Do you still think that it's necessary to cull a whole collection?
Well, yes and no. Again, it depends on the situation. If I'm, I use my collection, for example, and you can see just over my right-hand shoulder here as I've got a little Murray Darling sitting there watching me at the moment. Yeah. I've got a couple of snakes. I don't have anything super expensive. I don't breed. Yeah. If I was to get an infection into my little collection, would I cull everything? Probably not, because I'm not going to be exposing other animals to that. Probably in my situation, I'd consider it because I'm potentially from a client point of view. But, if I've got a kid comes in with a snake or two and they're not well, I'm probably not going to cull that. If I'm dealing with a big breeder who is breeding animals that are potentially going to be sold and disseminated into the population, that's a different story. And so that becomes an issue, not only from a health issue, but also from an ethical point of view, is what you can, do and
do the whole industry
control infection. Yeah, absolutely. Because, and the thing too is it's, you can very quickly get your name out there that you're selling animals with problems. And so, so I've certainly had some pretty good discussions with people about what they're going to have to consider doing. And then on top of that, it also depends on the type of virus. If you've got something like a sunshine or a Borna virus in your collection, that's serious. They're snake killers.
But it's
something where coronavirus, for example.
But in saying that, though, as well, I get this idea that reptile keepers think that it's dirty collections that get these viruses, and it's absolutely, it's non-discriminatory. It's like COVID-19. It just, you're in the wrong place in the wrong time, and it's a chain of like it's just a chain of handling, and this person, that person. Have you found that can those diseases come into a collection on people visiting your collection?
Theoretically, yes. There are. If we look at the types of viruses, and probably the best example is not so much in the snakes, but in bearded dragons. So bearded dragons get a virus called adenovirus. Yeah. Very, very common in the US and increasingly more common here in Australia.
Somebody actually asked earlier about that. Yeah.
So adenovirus is a very hardy virus. It's very difficult to kill that virus. Yeah. And it theoretically, you can transmit that from one animal to another on what we call fomites. So your hands, your clothing, equipment, that sort of stuff, you can contaminate it across that to another animal. Something like sunshine virus, for example, sunshine virus is not a particularly tough virus. It's actually very easy to kill, and it doesn't survive very long outside an animal. And so just general, pretty much what we're all doing now, hand washing and that sort of stuff, is probably enough to actually prevent that. The sunshine virus is proving, and I believe there's actually a PhD study being done on this, I think, looking at the infectivity of how these viruses work. And sunshine virus is being shown not to be potentially that easy to transmit from one animal to the other. You really got to have very close direct contact, and or contaminated equipment. Literally feeding tongs where the snake gets saliva on it, and you go and feed the next snake, and the saliva gets transmitted. Whereas something like the nitoviruses, the true sort of real respiratory viruses, are much more airborne, and so there is the theory that they can actually be transmitted with a bit more distance between animals. And so, it's theoretically possible, absolutely, to spread from one animal to the next. And I've seen that happen using equipment. A really good example I had from a few years ago now was a guy that I still remember, he had four snakes, and he had a new one that came into the collection that had sunshine virus. He had one feeding tub, and he'd take one snake out, put it in the feeding tub, feed the snake in there, put that snake back, didn't clean the tub out between animals, and he cross-infected and he killed all 4 snakes. And I still remember having that conversation with him about, what sunshine virus was, because he'd never heard of it, and secondly, what good quarantine and good feeding practices were. So,
I guess it's what we're getting to learn now is a lot of people are learning good hygiene going through this whole crisis. Washing hands, the normal stuff that you don't, you think that people, that's stuff that people take on board, and you see places like Spain that just goes nuts. You go like, what are they doing? That is, I don't want to go into that, but because you're talking reptiles. Somebody asked you, Jordan Stokes asked, I know most viruses have moderate incubation periods, but are there many reported cases that are asymptomatic?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, g'day, Jordan. How are you? So we, I think the 2 best examples of that I can give you is there are published data on sunshine virus. Yeah. And there's when I was involved, there's 4 or 5 of us around the country, vets, that were involved in the early sort of workups with sunshine virus. And there was a case that in one capital city, and I won't name where it is, but there was one case where there was a snake that tested positive pretty much every month for, and I'm going to say it was like 550 days. It's like, it was out there. And this snake did not show any symptoms of sunshine virus. And I've personally dealt with snakes that were perfectly healthy for, 5 years or more, that then suddenly developed. And the one that sticks in my mind was actually a case of Bornavirus that I saw in diamond pythons. And I saw this client, and he had bought 2 diamond pythons from a pet store 4.5 years before he brought them into me. Yeah. Had never had any other snakes, didn't have any friends, had never come into contact with any other snakes. One of these diamond pythons, within 24 hours, went from perfectly healthy to one of the most severe neurological diseases I've ever seen in an animal. Really? Ultimately, we diagnosed that one with Bornavirus. Yeah. And that animal had that virus for at least 4.5 years before it suddenly decided to actually cause a problem. I subsequently tested the other animal. We had a pair of them. Yeah. I subsequently tested the other animal. It was positive as well. And to my knowledge, that animal is still alive, and that would be 5 years ago. So that animal has had Bornavirus for probably 10 years plus and is still going well.
But that makes you think, though. I mean, all those years that people were going on about diamond syndrome. You remember that, like,
diamond python syndrome.
Could it just maybe, could it be undiagnosed cases of Bornavirus where people go, oh, but we've had it for its whole life, but they could have been. That's interesting stuff.
I'm a strong believer there's no such condition as diamond python syndrome. That was bantered around sort of 5-10 years ago. That was the big thing. Diamond pythons get diamond python syndrome. I haven't heard anybody say diamond python syndrome for years now. Yeah. So showing your age, mate.
The show where the history gets mentioned, people go, "Wow, right. I forgot about that." Bloody hell.
I am very, very strongly suspicious a lot of these so-called diamond python syndrome were actually Bornavirus. And when you look at the data for Bornavirus through the lab that does the testing, it's something like 95% of cases of Bornavirus are in diamond pythons. When diamond python syndrome was being spoken about, I used to challenge people and say, send me the animals, give me the samples, and let me test them and let me do some investigations, rather than just getting on Facebook, or back then it was MySpace and all that sort of stuff.
Aussie Pythons,
Aussie Pythons was a good one. Yeah, my diamond python's got diamond python syndrome. Well, that means nothing. Let's actually investigate it. And I never had a single person ever take me up on their offer to send me their animal, so I could actually work out what actually killed it and disprove diamond python syndrome. So I think a lot of keepers, unfortunately, their worst case, their own enemies, because they never actually investigate the sort of problem. So.
Have they found Bornavirus in the US? Is it do those occur in US collections?
That's a very good question. I would suggest probably yes, but I honestly don't know. I'd have to double check on that one. I can't think of any published data that I can think of. It's definitely been diagnosed in Europe.
Yeah.
And generally anything that's in Europe will at some point make its way into the US. So I would dare say yes. But it's certainly something here that we certainly have here. Thankfully, I haven't seen a confirmed case of it for a little while now. But it's definitely around. So
tell me something with the nidovirus. Like I've seen sunshine and I've dealt with sunshine, and I've seen nidovirus and I've dealt with nidovirus and stuff. of the diseases that I've seen and helped with, nidovirus seems to me a lot harder. I mean, it's I've not seen a virus kill snakes like nidovirus does. And it's a drawn out process. You think you're winning, they get better and then they get nailed. It's almost it's like they eventually just can't breathe anymore. It's like you would know more you'd know what happens in their lungs and stuff. As far as I can see, how does our nidovirus differ from the US nidovirus that the guys are dealing with in the carpet python collections over there and the tree python collections?
Yeah. So there's quite a number of the nidovirus, and just as a segue for in our current times, nidoviruses are actually coronaviruses.
Oh.
So we as reptile vets have been dealing with coronavirus for many years now. This whole thing that's happening now is kind of, we just sort of sit back.
Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but we used to see, we still see a lot of these snakes that every year get sick at around this time of year, or a little bit later, when people have cooled them down for winter and they're starting to warm them up for the breeding, that sort of stuff. They used to always get respiratory infections, and we always thought it was because they were being cooled down. Well, what's actually being shown is that a lot of these animals have got nidovirus, and it's the stress of being cooled down that actually seems to bring it to the fore, and they get sick again. But when we actually look at the types of viruses around the world, there's ball python nidovirus is probably the worst one as far as a pathology. When you see, I haven't personally seen any, but when you read the journals and you look at the images of the lungs of these snakes, these ball pythons, they're basically trying to breathe through a wet sponge, and so you can understand why these animals are dying from essentially they're suffocating on their own.
I guess you could compare it to these action movies that we see where they put a blanket over people's face and pour water over their mouths, try and breathe through that,
water torture. That and so it's massively thickened lungs that are getting it. Now, the snakes that get it here in Australia with the nidovirus that we have here, you get changes to their lungs. They're not as bad. What there's an interesting thing happening here in Australia is because there's nidovirus and then there's another organism called mycoplasma.
Oh yes.
Now, mycoplasma is something it's everywhere, and probably most reptile people or people that breed their own rats would have experienced it, because mycoplasma, one of the species of mycoplasma, is what causes the sort of chronic respiratory disease in rats.
Oh, okay.
And so people who've got large rat breeding facilities, guaranteed they will have it. But now the type of myco that snakes get is different. But when these snakes seem to get nidovirus and mycoplasma in combination is when they get sick. When they've got one or the other, they seem to be asymptomatic, and that makes it really difficult to make suggestions and advise people. These snakes that get that combination, we're using a particular antibiotic against the mycoplasma, and we seem to be able to get that under control. And I've certainly had snakes, not only me, but a couple of the other guys around too, that we've treated and we've tested them, follow-up testing, and we seem to be able to clear the mycoplasma. Whether or not the nidovirus can be cleared or not, we just don't know. But they seem, when they get that combination, they get sick, and it can take, because often you get people coming in and say, look, it's going to cost you $200, $300 to get testing. They don't want to do that. So, okay, let's try a good old Fortum, give it Fortum injections. Okay, that goes for a month or two. Oh, my snake's not getting any better. Okay, let's try some Baytril. That doesn't make it get better. So you're 3 or 4 months down the track before you finally convince people to go, you know what, let's test this thing and see whether we're dealing with this virus. Knowing full well right from the start they probably had it. But, you've got to work.
And it would have probably been just easier to just get the test done. I've been there and I've done that. There is somebody did ask something.
I got some questions.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Somebody did mention. Sorry, Colin. Somebody did say all RI I've tested has come back as Pseudomonas. I mean, you've got the other side of the coin now, where you go, okay, well, it could be a virus, but it could be a lot of other stuff as well that causes an RI. So
correct, yeah, and that's the difficult thing is and again, you can't look at a snake and say it's got a bacterial infection or it's got a viral infection. You cannot do it.
And you can't ask an expert on the internet and ask them if they think it's a. I mean, there's only one.
Google.
So
yeah, Dr. Google.
So what?
yeah.
So what do you? So your protocols that you put in place. So if you're the ideal situation, if somebody brought a snake into you, what's the process? What do you run? How do you run it?
Yeah, my ideal situation would be that I would get, firstly, a little drop of blood off it, look at a blood smear and confirm that there is actually an infection. So we're looking at high white cell counts, that sort of stuff. The reason for that is there are certain things that can cause, we can get tracheal blockages and those sort of things, and other things that can cause signs of RI, respiratory disease, that are not infectious. And so we need to rule that out. And so if we do and that's an in-house test, we quickly do that, look under the microscope, confirms an infection. We go, okay, we're dealing with bacterial virus. The ideal situation is then I'll do a tracheal wash where we put a little thin tube down the windpipe of the snake, put some saline down there, literally shake the snake around, tip it upside down. And as we pull the tube out, we actually suck some of the fluid out, and we would send that off for a culture. And we're going to grow the bacteria, and that's where the Pseudomonas comes into it.
Okay.
And so, you might grow Pseudomonas as a bacterial infection. That's great. And then also, ideally, what we'd do is we'd take a swab from the mouth, the glottis around the windpipe area, and from up the cloaca, and we'd submit that. And if I was dealing with a respiratory case, I would submit that for absolutely, definitely nitovirus and mycoplasma. If I had a question of virological disease, I'd chuck in sunshine virus there. I've just spent $800-900 of your money.
But you'd know. You'd know.
I know exactly what's wrong with it. But then Pseudomonas is an interesting one, and that question about that is an error. Pseudomonas is a very, very common bacteria that we grow out of snakes. Yeah. And what we've found over the years is, we always used to use Fortum because we thought Fortum was the thing to kill Pseudomonas. Yeah. We are seeing increasing numbers of snakes that have got resistance. And so, we need to be really careful about that. And so we are, as vets, very, very conscious about what antibiotics we're using, and we're really pushing culture testing to make sure we're using the right antibiotic in the right situation. And yes, it costs more, but you're going to end up with a better outcome because we can target the specific bug with the right antibiotic. Yeah. And from a World Health point of view, you're not promoting antibiotic resistance.
Bugs.
So,
yeah,
exactly. So and we from a dog point of view now, we've got about 4 or 5 cases of dogs that come to our clinics now that have got multi-resistant staph infections. And I've been in the industry 25 years, and that's only in the last 3 years that's happened. So we now, these dogs, when they come in, we're fully gowned up and all sorts of things. They're not even allowed in the clinic. So we're seeing these resistance problems, and so the whole use of antibiotics is really changing. It has to change. So the old days of just throwing Bactrim at everything, it doesn't work, guys. It just doesn't work.
So what did you say, Colin? There was
So I got a question from Mark Taylor, long time listener, first time commentator. So would that mean that you can't really quarantine for any period of time to rule out them having a virus?
Absolutely. It's a really good question. When this whole sunshine thing started in about 2008, we were talking about quarantining. Initially it was for 3 months, and then it was 6 months, and then it was 12 months, and then it was 2 years. And the reality is, if you're breeding snakes, you're not going to quarantine an animal out for 2 years. Yeah. That's just ridiculous. And so now the catchphrase that I use, and I certainly a couple other vets use, you cannot out quarantine those viruses. We've got snakes that have got these viruses for 5 years plus. Yeah. You cannot out quarantine. So, what you should be doing is getting these animals in. If they're valuable animals, or you've got a valuable collection, you need to make sure that you test those animals for those viruses. Keep them, quarantined in isolation from the rest of the collection for things like simple things like mites. The number of mite infestations still staggers me.
So just on the topic of those viruses, can mites transfer those viruses?
It hasn't been proven. Been very, very, very suspicious that it has been. Yeah. And what we're all looking for, and we have been for many years, is an outbreak of one of these viruses in a snake collection that has actually got mites, where we can actually catch the mites and test the mites for those viruses, but we just never had that opportunity. It just hasn't arisen. But we're always consciously looking sort of for that. It would make sense that they can, because these viruses have certainly been found in the blood of these snakes, and the mites are feeding on blood. So it would seem from logically that's what would happen, but it's never been actually proven that does happen. So, but to go back to that question, you cannot quarantine. Quarantine, and also there are very, 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 very few people in the world that can actually quarantine effectively to stop viruses transmission. And we're seeing that in the human situation right now. So, so if you've got a valuable animal that's coming into a collection, you need to test it, and you need to accept. If you're spending $5,000 on a het albino blah 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 whatever one of these crazy morphs that you guys breed, that's costing you $5,000.
Yeah,
and you're not
$800
thinking of spending $500 on some testing. You're nuts. It just makes no sense. Economically, makes no sense to me. So,
but would you keep them for a while first in this isolation, and then get them tested? Say after 6, or I know I've got the guys. There's a couple of guys now that I speak to regularly that test at 12 months. They test at 6 months. They test at 12 months, but then. Sometimes something comes down with a respiratory after like 16 months, and they go, where did that come from? From nowhere,
So the thing to understand with the testing of the viruses is that if you get a positive test, so these are DNA tests, they're what are called PCR tests. So they're actually looking for the DNA of the virus. So if you get a positive test, that's positive. There's no argument either way. If you get a negative test, that's the hard one, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's negative. What it means is that animal may be negative. It may not have been shedding the virus at the time that you took your sample. And so if you've got a collection that you really highly value, or you've got an animal that you really highly value, I would definitely be keeping that isolated. And I would do repeat testing every 3 months. Yeah. And the more negative tests you get, the more likely it's going to be negative. Now, I've never had anybody go past 2 tests, because I think you can go overboard with it. If you've got an animal that you've kept isolated and you've tested it twice and it hasn't shown, and it hasn't test positive, I'm in most cases going to be very comfortable to say you've got a negative animal. Let's put it into the collection and do what you want with the type.
And especially if it's gone through a cold season and a warm season and a cold season again, I mean, that's,
absolutely. So the longer that you keep them separated, then the more tests you do, the more likely is that it's going to give you a true result of what it is. But these DNA tests are extremely sensitive, and so if the viruses are there, it's going to pick it up. But with that proviso that a negative test, you have to take that into consideration. And that's, to be honest, the test itself, yes, okay, it might cost you $300 to get it. What you're actually paying for in most of those cases is someone like me making an understanding what is behind that test and making recommendations. It's not, anybody can take a swab and stick it up the bum of a snake and send it off to a lab. Getting that result back and then interpreting that and understanding the collection or the situation, that's the bit you're actually paying for. So, and I've had that happen where people have taken their animals to just their regular vets. They've had the swabs taken and they've come back positive, and then they've gone back to the regular vets and they've gone, well, we don't know. All we did was the swab. Ring Shane. And you go, well, hang on a second. So, that's not real fair. So, so you're paying a lot for the knowledge of understanding the epidemiology and the pathophysiology and all the big words that go with these viruses.
Just a question for you, Shane. What type of timeline are we looking at tonight? I don't want to hold you. I don't want to hold you back.
No, I was only just going to go and watch Netflix, so I'm cool.
Oh. Okay, so helping your fellow human is on your Okay, so that's good.
Another question from Cookies Critters again.
Yeah,
Shane, have you considered manufacturing and marketing a commercial viral test kit that keepers and breeders could use,
that's a really good question too. So we have an unusual situation in Australia where all the viral testing that's done for the reptiles is done by one person in one lab in Perth. So Tim Hyman, many of you will know. Tim sort of sits in the background. He's not on Facebook. He's not on social media. He's a lovely guy. Yeah. He is also one of the cleverest people I've ever spoken to. He's just a wealth of knowledge. And he does it all on his own, in the sense he has this little lab and just does it on his own type sort of thing. And so it's not a big enough market in Australia to be commercialised.
Yeah.
And so the commercial labs here in Australia, they can't see the money in it. And so whereas in the US, I presume Cookie's talking about fish head labs. And so fish head is an interesting thing, because it's actually a joint venture between some keepers who had nitivirus go through their collection, and I know the guys that were involved in that. They're good friends of mine.
Tia and Cody, isn't it?
Cody and Pierre. So they experienced it firsthand, and I'm lucky I catch up with them every year when they go to the US, and Cody just talks too much about snakes.
He gives a run for I've listened to those shows, because I listen to stuff. One word, you'll be very happy with this. One fun fact that I learned from their show is a word called co-anal swab. And I sort of went co-anal swab because it sounded dodgy, and then I went, I actually I googled that, what the hell is a co-anal swab? So for you guys that's out there, a co-anal swab is it's a little indentation in the roof of the snake's mouth where they take the sense that
comes out and goes back up there.
Yeah.
So.
You stick a swab up there, and you literally scrape the snot out of it. It's like your sinus cavities almost.
Yeah,
and
that's what people are having done to them now with coronavirus testing. That is exactly what
I saw those things up there. I was wondering, is that a do you call it anal swabbing in humans?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's got nothing to do with the anus.
Not the other end. Not the other end.
So that was my big word for the day. I thought, okay, anal swab.
Look, you learn something new every day.
You drop that word in a conversation, and people go, "What are you saying? Go anal swab. What does that mean? Tell me. I need to know.
It's a swab up your bum, and then the same swab used up my bum. So that fish heads was a conglomeration between them and a pathologist that they were working with out of, I think it was the University of Florida. I think that's where she came from. So they've been able to develop a commercial kit. And again, you're talking about Australian population 25 million, US population of pushing 300 million. So it's a whole different.
I think the population of Australia and America have reptiles.
Correct. Yeah. So it's
people don't understand the Australian market.
Yeah, it's the economics of it. And look, we've done it. I've done it sometimes where I've had big collections where I don't want people bringing in 100 snakes that potentially got sunshine virus into my clinic. So I'll make them up kits, send them out to them, and they'll swab their own snakes and then send it back to me and we send it to the lab. And it's not so much commercial kits. So.
And it's pretty straightforward once you've done it. You just need to see. You need to see it. You see how to do it once, and then if you see how to send out a kit, it's so much easier. Yeah. And look, I still do that for certain cases. But if I've got 3 or 4 snakes that we want tested or something like that, I'll get people to bring them in because it's just easier and quicker for me to do that. I know that it's done properly. But if I've got someone, when they did testing for you years ago, and it was kits and stuff that we sent out and that sort of thing. So, somebody asked as well. My question: Where do majority of veterinarians have access to this testing now, or are there only specialized vets? Where do you go if somebody wants to take their snake to get tested? Where's the best point of where do they go?
Ask that question.
Okay, yeah. So the reality is, any veterinarian in Australia can take a swab and send it to that lab. So there's nothing stopping that. The problem you've got is interpreting that result, like we were saying before. So and what. If it comes back a positive, and if you're dealing with a vet that has no experience with reptiles, or even if it comes back a negative, if you're dealing with a vet that doesn't fully understand what those viruses are and that sort of stuff, that becomes a problem because then they're ringing me or they're ringing someone else in the reptile vet world trying to get answers. So I would always encourage people, if you're going to get testing, is to find a vet before you need to get the testing in your area that can one, take a test, anybody can do that, but also then interpret it and know where to send it. And we still get, like every couple of months, we'll get a vet email us and say, what's the address of where I've got to send this test? And they don't even know what they're testing for, but they've been asked by a keeper who's rocked up at the door with a snake to test this snake for sunshine virus. Well, they'll ring us and say, what's sunshine virus? I've had somebody come in with a snake today and they want me to test it for sunshine virus. What do I need to know? And you go, well, okay, yeah,
Long
you
story.
shouldn't probably be testing that. Yeah. If you don't know what you're talking about, you shouldn't. I don't deal with horses while you're dealing with snakes, type sort of thing. So I would, and there are enough vets around there. You've only got to see, we have a national conference each year. There's about 150, 200 vets that come to that, and they're spread out from around the country. So there are plenty of vets out there that have been exposed to it and can certainly do the testing and interpret results. It's about building that relationship with a good vet.
But people don't have to be worried that they, like it is a little bit more accessible now than it used to be 5 years ago.
Yeah, and as you said before, technically it's not difficult to take the swab, and they can access the lab, and they can call Tim. He's happy to answer their questions and that sort of stuff. So
somebody asked a question here. Daniel Kamish asked, "Will F10 eliminate nidovirus in the enclosure if a snake with nidovirus was housed in the enclosure?" I guess that brings it down to protocols to disinfect. What's the best way to clean cages, and what chemicals? I believe in F10. It's through and through.
So I like F10 too for a couple of reasons. One is it's got pretty much no side effects when made up properly. You don't want to use it undiluted. That's not a good idea. But if you make it up properly,
but there's a lot of things in life that you don't want to do undiluted.
So read the instructions is the take-home message.
Yes, Colin.
Make it up properly, and make sure it has proper contact time. That you make it up the right concentration, and off the top of my head, it might be 10 or 15 minutes. So it's not just spray it on and wipe. You've actually got to spray it on, leave it, and then come back and clean it off. So, but F10 will kill. It certainly kills sunshine virus. It certainly will kill nidovirus. There's lots of research that's done with it, so I like it. But things like bleach. Bleach is very effective at killing most things. You just got to be mindful of the chlorine stench. Virkon is another one that's out there. There's a few really good disinfectants. So good old vinegar and water is not suitable.
But bleach dilute. What if somebody if they only had the budget to have use bleach? I use bleach for a long time. What sort of dilution would you use? Would you dilute bleach down to use in?
So, from my very vague memories, I think it's 1 ml of bleach per 30 mils of water. Is the concentration. So, and then whenever I would recommend using bleach is if you've got to rinse off the enclosure afterwards to get the residue off.
And let it air,
and air. Okay. It's the chlorine that will. And I've seen snakes with chlorine toxicosis from. It was industrial strength bleach. The guy decided to clean ours. He was a butcher and he used the same stuff they used to clean the butcher's shop out, to clean his enclosures out, and these snakes came in completely neurologic, and they died. So so you do have to be a bit careful with it. So.
A random question that somebody asked earlier that I wasn't sure.
Sunky with the longest question of the night.
Okay, well, he can just wait. he can just wait for now because I know. Yeah, there was a question earlier tonight that I thought was interesting. Somebody asked, "Is cat saliva more bacterial? Is there more things alive in a cat bite than a dog bite?"
If you looked at probably bacterial load, the answer is probably no. They're probably the same.
Yep.
What is important is the type of bacteria in there. And the question is, would I want to get bitten by a cat or a dog? And I had a choice. I would go a dog every day of the week.
Oh, really?
Cats are nasty little things. They've got some stuff in their mouth that really will do some serious damage to you. So, it's not so much the number of bacteria, it's the type of bacteria that are in there. So.
Okay, so there you go, Bryce. That wasn't a silly question. I thought, what is that question? And I thought, and I think, so cat bites, no go, but no bites good. I'm squeamish of snake bite. I'm squeamish.
Even a python bite is good.
So, between a dog bite and a snake bite, what carries more bacteria? Or types? What do you reckon?
I would probably suggest that the dog is probably still safer than the snake. Snakes are
really?
Well, snakes is a good one. You swab a snake's mouth and you'll often get Pseudomonas, and Pseudomonas is a nasty bug. It's if you get 3rd-degree burns, like these people that get 80% burns and die, they're not dying from the burn, they're dying from second infection.
Bloody hell!
It's Pseudomonas that kills them. So. Pseudomonas is not a nice bug, so I would try and steer clear of that one. And Pseudomonas is not a bug that you find in the dog's mouth.
Stay away from any bite. That's the.
I've only ever been bitten by one dog in my life,
Yeah,
and I've managed to avoid it. I've
Yeah.
had probably maybe 20 snakes, but but I've only been bitten by one dog, and I've never had a nasty cat bite, thankfully.
So, Chris, I think asked, do you think that snakes eating a diet of breeding rats eating only pellets? Okay, do you think that snakes eating a diet of breeding rats eating only pellets? Okay, so I'm assuming you're commercially made rats is a factor why captive collections are more susceptible to. Do you think that they're more susceptible of the virus because of what we feed them? I think that's what he's asking.
No, I don't think there is. Yeah, I think it's important, that old adage, "You are what you eat," is important. And there's this whole argument about snakes with UV and vitamin D and that sort of stuff don't need it because they're eating whole prey and that sort of thing. But what people have to realise is that if you're breeding rats and then you're feeding them crappy food and you're keeping them in the dark, nutritionally that rat is not going to be anywhere near as good as what a healthy rat that's exposed to sunlight now, bearing in mind that it's not like you're going to have free-range rats, a farm of free-range rats and that sort of stuff. But you need to have the cut. Now, the benefit we have is that the rat pellets, the formulations that are used, this unbelievable amount of research that goes into what goes into rat food because of the human medicine side of things. And so from a laboratory animal, they get fed very well. So I don't think there's any real issue from that. And it certainly doesn't make them any more susceptible to viruses. The snakes get viruses because they get exposed to snakes with viruses. And that's the way it happens. It's got nothing to do with diet.
There you go, Chris.
It's like people getting exposed to viruses from people, I mean, I know, and I think a nutritional deficiency is very different to a viral.
Yeah. I think rather than diet being the main contributor, husbandry is a big contributor. If you've got a snake that you're keeping too cold and stressed and that sort of stuff, it's going to be much more prone to getting infections because of that. Yeah. And you could be feeding the best quality rats in the world, but if its temperature's not right, that causes stress. That causes long-term immunosuppression. That makes them more prone to infection. Yeah.
Now that's any more questions there, Colin?
No, mate, no.
Okay, let me just see. I know that it's broad spectrum working on parasite. Okay, see, somebody asked earlier, broad spectrum parasite treatment. Okay, so if you've got, if you just generally treat them of what the question was, if you're getting reptiles in to treat them for just to hit them with medicine to just treat them, like if you're climatizing something, do you think that's necessary? I mean, no. I think, I spoke to somebody about coccidiosis and stuff in dragons, and you and I know we've had long conversations about, natural parasite loads in reptiles. Yep. What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on that? I mean, for youngsters that just want to start medicating,
Yeah, I think it's a really bad idea to just be randomly medicating stuff. And so it's very, in the reptile world, what we should be doing is fecal sampling. Yeah. And if we look at snakes, 99.9% of snakes are captive bred, fed on captive prey. Yeah. They should not have worms. They should not have coccidia. They shouldn't have any of those parasites. Yeah. So when we get them in that have got worms, I always go, wild-caught animal, or something's not happened right here. So, so I would not routinely worm snakes. If people wanted to do that, I would really encourage them to doing a fecal sample first and making sure, one, that they need it, and if there are worms there, is you're identifying what the worms are, what the parasites are, and treating with the most effective drug. Things like bearded dragons, for example, 95% of bearded dragons have got coccidia at small levels, and it doesn't cause a problem. Yeah. And if you start dosing them with some of the medications for coccidia, for example, it actually makes them sick. They go off their food. So, and it's not causing any problems. So we don't do it. And things like pinworm or oxyurid worm in bearded dragons is another one. For many years, people thought, they're a parasite, they're a worm, they shouldn't be there. Now, I would want to see major problems with the bearded dragon before I would treat that for a pinworm infestation, because it's now considered as being part of the normal population of organisms in the gut and possibly is involved in digestion. So you wipe those out and you actually can cause problems with the digestion. but certainly we certainly treat coccidia and bearded dragons, but I want to have an animal that's actually showing symptoms and confirming that on a fecal sample. So I would not just be wholesale worming and treating. Certainly not for something like coccidia, unless you've got a big collection and you were having problems.
But I mean, so if I'm understanding you right, though, is instead of trying to treat them for those things, maybe we need to just tweak their husbandry a little bit as well.
Exactly.
Reduce the stress levels, and their natural immune system can get on top of those things.
Correct. Yeah, and coccidia is a classic example. Coccidia is a parasite of intensive industries. You see it in piglets, in piggeries. You see it in chickens, in those sort of situations. You see it in zoo animals that are under stress. The kangaroos that you see lazing around in many of these zoos, while they look like they're nice and comfortable, they're actually under stress because there's people and kids running around and
screaming and stuff.
Screaming. That sort of thing. Those animals often have high levels of coccidia when compared to their wild counterparts. And also because you've got them in a captive environment, they're super infecting themselves with it, so they can just never get on top of the numbers that they're ingesting and that sort of stuff. And so you do have to take all those things into consideration. Stress is a big thing when it comes to coccidia. So but I had dragon in today. I did a fecal sample on it, and there was coccidia there, and I just said to the owner, look, there's coccidia there. I'll make a note of it in the record. We don't need to do anything about it. You've got a perfectly healthy dragon. Don't stress. It's something we'll repeat on a yearly basis. If the numbers are increasing, then we might treat it. But we don't jump in and treat it.
Something I never really tested for with pythons. Do they also carry a natural parasite load? Like, have you found that captive?
So they'll have. There's another group of organisms called flagellates, which are little microscopic things that. So most people have probably heard of Giardia, the thing that causes barley belly. Well, that's belongs to a group of organisms called flagellates. And if you take a fecal sample from a snake, fresh fecal sample, look under the microscope, you'll see those organisms in there. Are they a parasite? Yes, they are, because they're living inside another organism. Are they causing a problem? No, not necessarily. When their numbers increase, that's when they cause an issue. And then snakes will often see them getting quite inflamed intestines, and they'll get diarrhea, or they'll get quite bloated and that sort of stuff. And so when you take a fecal sample and look under the microscope and see hundreds of these things swimming around, then you'll treat them. But when you treat them, you're not aiming to actually get rid of them all. You're actually just reducing their numbers back to what is normal.
It'd be impossible. I guess it'd be impossible to get all of them dead.
All of them dead, and nor do you want them all of them dead, because they're actually part of the normal population. And then the question is, why did the numbers get to that stage? Well, there's something happened to make that snake develop that problem.
But I guess I guess it's something that we're also learning over time now, and with modern, with the way we screen stuff. Like humans have got beneficial bacteria as well that keeps us healthy. It's when it gets out of hand that we start having issues.
And it often gets out of hand because people are using drugs the wrong way at the wrong time and upsetting the balance of things. And so
do you think
we want to try and avoid that.
Do you think it makes them less effective as well, like the immune systems, if they're being treated for ailments that are not really there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because these drugs are not without side effects. A good example is fenbendazole, which is a drug that's often used to worm animals with. I've never happened. It's never happened in my clinic, but I know of cases in the US where people have just wormed continuously with fenbendazole. The problem with that is it causes bone marrow suppression, and it causes a really life-threatening anemia if it's used incorrectly. And that drug is readily available over the counter as a sheep drench.
It's the same year as well, though, can't you?
Yeah, it's exactly. So if you don't know how to use that properly, or using the wrong doses, or using the wrong frequency, you can actually potentially cause life-threatening and anemia.
Is that Panacea? Fenbendazole?
That's exactly what it is. Panacea.
I knew. I knew my mind was saying it. I know this. What is it? Panacea? Here we go. Panacea. It's that pink.
It's that drug, the big pink bottle. So,
that you get in like a litre over the counter.
Correct.
Yeah, don't use that.
And so people buy that and they go and wholesale dose things. And they're potentially using a drug that isn't actually doing anything because there aren't anything there for it to treat.
So I guess the moral of the story is do what the vet says, really, like go through the screening process, because I remember as well, early days coming to see you, I also just threw shit because, you go, should I really test it? But if you got 400 animals, it just makes sense.
Yeah, you need to build that into your budget of
it's
the economics
business.
of actually owning those animals.
It's a deduction. Is it a deduction? Can you claim it from the tax man?
Oh, there you go.
Hey,
Oh,
there's
there we
another
go.
deduction for everybody.
So next week on the show will be a financial advisor discussing the tax deduction.
Yeah, you're not an
it's a-
accountant, so I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or you can conduct all your electricity or your
yeah.
food.
We cover all that stuff on this channel. You know, like we talk we talk the hard. We get to the hard facts on this. You know, we factual around here. There's no fake news here. Yeah. So Cookie's Critters, he's very involved in this. I know he keeps a lot of
He's
bearded.
on fire.
He keeps a lot of bearded dragons up in New South Wales. I think New South Wales. Yeah, he's doing all right
Yeah.
there.
Sydney,
There was something that I was thinking about. Is there anything else that you? So first thing, ring up the vet, go and see the, do the
get a
tests.
relationship with a vet, and then if you've got a large collection, you need to look at your collection from a herd health point of view, just like a dairy farmer does.
Yeah.
There are things that can be done to actually improve the health of your whole collection.
Yeah.
And whether that's doing site visits and viral testing and fecal sampling or those sort of things, is looking at your whole collection as effectively a herd, because economically, some of you guys, it staggers me the amount of money some people spend on reptiles. It's nuts.
Yeah.
I've only ever bought one animal, and that was off that Haberfield bloke, and he took me to the cleaners for a green tree python many years ago. Everything else of mine is surrendered or I've saved and kept. So
Have you still got the green pythons?
no, the bloody thing died of it developed a severe respiratory disease and died.
Hey.
I don't know. So
Hey.
but
But it happens. But you see, it's non-discriminatory. It can happen in any collection.
That snake was alive and eating 3 days later, and then I came in and it was actually in the tank behind me here, and it was dead in the water at the bottom of the tank.
And look,
Yeah.
you've already using it for another snake. So
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
got-
I didn't even clean it out, so
I can see that. I can see that glass needs a bit of a clean there. I'll come over.
Yeah.
I'll come and clean that
Oh,
glass for
okay.
you, mate. Yeah.
There's a few streaks up the top there, but that's one side. That's the other side. I got a diamond python in that side and 2 Murray darlings in
Oh,
this side.
but that is nice. A nice decorated cage. I think a lot of people are enjoying that. So tell me something now. Signs of respiratory infection. I don't want to hold you up the whole night. I think we'll go till it's already 10 o'clock, but we'll go for a little bit longer. But so if somebody was worried about, so what do you need to look for in what are the signs of an RI?
Yep.
Telltale signs. A lot of I know what but you give us a little bit of just what to look for.
Yeah, snakes. You'll hear them. You'll actually hear them gurgling, and particularly when you pick them up, you'll feel the rattle. And what's happening there is that snakes have got a very narrow, long windpipe, and they get a little bit of discharge in the windpipe, and it's moving up and down the windpipe, and it's basically like a rasp, and you can feel that. They'll often have bubbles coming from their mouth. They'll often have what's commonly called mouth rot, or more correctly known as stomatitis. They'll get little crusts in the corners of their mouth, along the mouth. They'll often have pus up in the teeth. The tongue might not come out, or if the tongue does come out, the fork may be stuck together. And very sometimes you'll get them where the throat will sort of billow out a bit as they're actually using that to suck air in. And on really severe cases, you'll get the mouth open and there'll be open mouth breathing. So remember, reptiles can't cough, so you won't see reptiles coughing. Whereas so that's the snakes. And the bearded dragons, you'll get they'll look like they're coughing, but they're actually using their whole body to sort of expel the air. And you'll see them, and they'll do big throat breathing, and you'll hear them trying to make this rasping sort of noise. And they'll sometimes have bubbles coming out of their mouth. And then the skinks, the blue tongues, and the shinglebacks, they'll get bubbles coming out of their eyes. They'll get bubbles coming out of their mouth. They'll be sneezing. You get sneezing in the blue tongues, for example, and you get weight loss. They're the big ones. So there's slightly different sort of clinical signs depending on the species that you're dealing with.
A good tip that I could give to anybody that was wondering if he's got RIs is one of the first signs that I always used to see was the tongue stocks, that they stop flicking their tongues. And then you get the sheath, the tongue sheath, the abscesses that you find in there, and that's usually a sign that's usually a pus that's blocking up the tongue. So a good tip when you're cleaning your snakes, when you're going through the racks or when you're going through the cages, you literally just have to touch them or disturb them. If the tongue doesn't come out straight away, then watch. And if the tongue's not flicking, 100% of the time, if the tongue's not flicking, then there's an issue. That's a small,
absolutely.
little things to just keep an eye out of. That's one of the biggest things that I've seen in my career of RIs is that tongue. You watch the tongue. If it's flicking vigorously, if it's stuck together, that's early signs of respiratory infection, and you take it to the vet straight off.
Yeah. And that's those subtle things, because reptiles are very good at hiding that they're sick until they're really, really sick. And so looking for those subtle changes is the key. And that's where just getting to know your animals and having a number of animals that you can actually cope with. Getting hundreds and hundreds of animals is not, and not being able to look after them properly is not the way to go. You want to have, what you can afford and what you can afford, not from a dollar point of view, but from time as well. So
because it's those subtle things that get you in a problem. Like, I mean, if you miss that, if it starts with not, miss the meal. Okay, sometimes they can miss it. If a well cared for python misses a week of food, then it's a first sign that something could go wrong. Then you need to start doing the checks for the mouth, the inflamed gum, the inflamed. I mean, I went and helped a guy the other day with it that had a RI issue in his collection, and all I usually do is you pull the lip open and you can see the blood vessels as soon as that's if those little blood vessels on the jaw, lower jaw, there's something wrong. It's fine. Like I'm convinced it's an RI or something, and then get it checked out. But if you've got 100 snakes and you can't pick that up, and it's just that it's just you overloaded. It's after work. You have to do your job. You want to get to bed. And it's you overloaded with just chores. Then it's very likely that you'll miss it. And once one has it, all you have to do is try and feed that snake. He misses a meal and cross-contaminate, try and feed the snake below it with the same mouse. Man, that's the best way to cause troubles all through your collection by doing that,
100% agree.
So it's exactly what you're saying, if you're not managing, get rid of some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one snake will become 100 snakes, and then you're in real deep shit.
So if there's your time now is if anybody wants to ask a question, I'm not going to hold you up for much longer, Shane. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us, and I think we sort of narrowed it down to there's not much outside of, if you've got one of those viruses, your best port of call is going to be to take that snake to a vet, or at least find out how to do the test and send the test off, and then just wait. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing that you can do. You can raise it. What would you do though if you're waiting for the result to come back and you're not really in the point to medicate? What can you do? Can you raise the temperature? What can
raise
you
the temperature a couple of degrees is probably going to help, just to increase their metabolic rate. Certainly they've got a bacterial infection. That's just going to improve their immune system. That's really all you can do. A turnaround time on a test. We take a test. It takes about 2 weeks to get results. It's quite a long time to wait. And we've been in the situation for the last 2 months where the lab's actually been closed because it's at Murdoch University, so they shut the university down. So we haven't been able to do testing for 2 months. We literally only on Monday got the go ahead that the lab's opened again, so we can send samples off. So. So there's some animals that we've had in the last couple of months that we've sort of gone, you might have something, and we just can't test it. So that's been a bit frustrating. But no, there's not much you can do. There's some people decide to hit them with antibiotics, that sort of stuff. But it's sometimes it's a bit of a waiting game.
Gee, now the questions. Sorry, I'm like, it's like World War III happening here with questions. Let me just see, because we've answered a lot of the questions that's being asked now. People just have to watch the show from the start again, because I know there was a lot of people came across from another show. Effective quarantine time, we've touched on that. There was a UV question that I'm just trying to figure out what was it.
Darren Boswell asked the question. I must have missed it. Sorry, Darren.
So cookies critters as well. Adenovirus. It's adenovirus. Is it? Yeah, it's not. Adenovirus is the old word we use.
So the at bit at the front, I've actually never understood why there was the difference,
Yeah,
but it's now just called adenovirus. So.
Okay.
Is it across
Cookies asks, Sunshine, all those viruses, are they transferable across species?
No. So sunshine virus only affects pythons and has only been found in pythons. There's been limited testing done on elapids and colubrids, never been found in any other species other than the pythons. And I actually was involved in a large collection that had a large assortment of different species of lizards and turtles and all sorts of things in very close proximity to sunshine virus positive snakes, and we tested those animals and there was nothing. So from personal experience, I can say that. In fact, none of the Bornavirus, Arenavirus, Furlavirus, sunshine virus, or Bornavirus, it's all pythons. So you're going to get snakes, get colubrids here in Australia. In the US, they've got some problems over there with Furlavirus and inclusion body disease. But here in Australia, colubrids don't get anything, or elapids. Elapids are tough, but they'll kill you. So
they come with their own set of risks. Yeah.
So that's fine. Things like the adenoviruses will infect multiple different, and there's groups of adenovirus, different types of adenoviruses. So beta dragons get a specific type of adenovirus, but they are also susceptible to other types of adenoviruses, which have been found in multiple other species of reptiles. Adenoviruses are everywhere.
I'm trying to figure out if you're saying adenovirus just really fast, or you just saying
adenovirus.
You are saying you just so used to saying it, it just rolls off the tongue so well, Shane. Well done.
Question's back now. You found his question.
Okay, so here was the question. Sorry, I was just fascinated by how easy you say that word. You know, I think the vet that came up with that name, he did that just to mess with us. Just to throw you off. You know, say this out loud and fast. You know. Somebody asked, as a python keeper, instead of having UV available all day, am I better off giving them a couple of hours in the morning and a couple of hours in the afternoon? And they says Arcadia Pro, T5, Jungle Dawn. I mean, it's the same for all, you know.
Yeah, I personally think that's probably the way to go, because if you look at the natural ecology of many of these animals, they bask in the morning,
and
they
at night.
hide during the heat of the day, and they bask again at night. And so I think that's probably not a bad way to do it. But then it gets complicated, because then you need to really set up your tanks with timers that allow you to do that. It's not. You also need to have your heat on through the day. So, do you use something like a ceramic heat emitter or one of those infrared heat emitters that produce no light? So they have that on during the day, and then you only just have LED lights on during the day. So there's only heat and visible light, but no UV light. Yep. So it's complicated. So I still run my animals on.
Brent Smith has chimed in.
12 hours on, 12 hours off type sort of thing, just because it's easy. But is it right? Probably not. I think we could probably do a lot better with our lighting sequences through a day. And actually, this tank behind me is an interesting one. I've literally I've about 6 weeks ago put this on a little $19 Bluetooth timers that I can connect in with an app.
The best, aren't they?
At dawn, at sunrise and sunset, it comes on and off. So I'm actually replicating that through the day.
Where was this stuff 5 years ago? It's so easy. All my lights in my all the light, you can't see the studio, but behind the green screen there's a whole bloody studio of stuff, But I've got all my lights synced to Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi made life easy now. There's a question here.
Google, turn this off and it'll turn it off. So.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that stuff. The lights lie in bed. Oh, they're off now. Any updates on a cure for sunshine nido? As Brent says, I heard blood testing was being researched from hatchies born from positive parents, hoping they would hold the answers. Have you got any?
There's certainly no cure. So with any of these viruses, the long-term
immunity
thing would be vaccinations. So, and there is some work with sunshine virus that's longer term, looking at vaccinations, and there was some work done with Furlavirus/OPMV in Europe. Many years ago, looking at viruses, looking at vaccinations. It didn't work, so it didn't sort of go progressing. Again, it comes down to the economics, is that you've got to get a pharmaceutical company who is willing to spend the money on the research to then produce the vaccine that they're then going to make money out of.
Yeah,
and it ain't going to happen. So, but we're seeing it now with the human coronavirus. Is that here's a world pandemic that's still they're talking a vaccine is 18 months to 2 years away, and that's how many billions of dollars are getting thrown at that. And we're talking about a little virus just in Australia for a handful of snakes.
That's only.
So it's not going to happen.
Did I know there was talk that the sunshine virus popped up in Europe a few years back.
Yes,
it did. Do you know if that caused issues over there, or have you heard anything more of that?
Yeah, so that what you're referring to is 2 cases that popped up in Germany.
We won't go into it. We'll just.
We won't go into that.
We're in it. We're in
it. Two cases that popped up in Germany. I know the people that were involved from a virology point of view from that, but I did not hear of anything that developed from that. So I think it was only in those 2 locations and never got out from there. And so the only place outside of Australia that sunshine virus has been reported is in those two separate collections in Germany. There was rumours, a report, and I'm going to say Malaysia, I think it was. It was Malaysia, that it had been found in Malaysia, but it never got published and was never proven. So it's an Australian virus.
We get all the good stuff down there. Tell me, with blue tongues, you've mentioned that they get the little bubbles in the eyes when they've got a cold. Like, I mean, I think I've got one here that the one that I've been talking to you about, Colin, that keeps. A question for you: a blue tongue that keeps shedding. I've got one here that is constantly shedding, like at least once every 4 weeks. The skin.
This is free advice.
It's free advice.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I've googled it, and I've people saying it's a low humidity and stuff. But I've seen that with snakes.
Yep.
That there's something like I've seen it with snakes after a heavy, if they've been sick for a while and they shake that sickness off, they have this really thick, solid shed. And if they look brand new after that, it's almost like they're shedding their system of
shit out of them
of the disease. I was wondering with the blue tongue, if something's wrong inside, could it be that that shed cycles gets triggered to sort of help the recovery?
So there's certainly. I anecdotally have seen animals that have had problems that then will shed. The classic one is a retained spectacle in a snake. Snakes seem to know that they've got one there, and they'll actually bring themselves into shed more regularly. Your comment about that these animals are sick for a while and then they seem to have this thick shed. There's some, not all. There's not evident. We know what controls shed cycles is thyroid levels. And if you're sick, your thyroid levels will drop. It's a whole syndrome, I think, called the euthyroid 6 syndrome. And so maybe there's a theory that would go that if a snake is sick and is depressed, what happens is those snakes' thyroid levels drop. And in snakes, a dropping thyroid level actually makes them shed, whereas in lizards, an increasing thyroid level makes them shed. So it doesn't hold true for the lizards, but potentially in snakes, those ones that are shedding more often because they're sick, is that because their thyroid levels are low? And we don't know. This is all I'm just sort of off the cuff remarks here, but I think we probably sometimes try and oversimplify things, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on that we just don't know what's going on. In a dog or a cat, we can take a blood sample and test the thyroid level really easily. We don't have that. We can test the thyroid level in a snake, but who the hell knows what a normal thyroid level in a snake is?
Because that's something I've definitely observed. Seeing they're sick for a while, and then you treat them, they shake the colds, and then they'll go through this real heavy, long shed cycle, where the eyes stay, and then they'll have this full-on, almost like a double thick brown shed. And as soon as that's off, they back onto the food, the tongue's flicking, that's sort of like, I've said to people, watch for that shed. As soon as they have that shed off of food, and they've gone, and they've contacted me and said, it's eating again now, it's fine, and then they, it's like...
And who knows, who knows what's going on metabolically and hormonally with those snakes.
I could, of course, be just making this up.
Yeah, well, that's true.
We don't know,
I haven't seen any double-blinded trials with you as an author yet, so we'll see how we go.
But it's interesting. So what do you think? So if you had a blue tongue, that's my free advice. So if you, I really just brought you on the show just to ask you this right at the end. So if you had a blue tongue that constantly is shedding, and it feels like the skin underneath, because it's not shedding, it's shedding it fully, but it's like every 3 weeks, and it's not eating. I'm hand feeding it just because I just want to make sure that it's getting food into it.
Yeah.
You know,
So I definitely be treating those mites, Manish. You should be getting onto that straight away.
Yeah.
So get rid of the mites. That's the first start. No, I'd be looking at blood panel of that and seeing, is that anemic? Is it unwell for a reason? And you effectively you're kind of working backwards. You're trying to find what because the shedding won't be the primary problem. It's happening.
But and what I don't get, everybody else is fine, but then I did notice those. Do they do those little bubbles from the eyes when they're coming up to a shed to help lift the shed though?
No. I've not seen that.
Okay, so
Yeah,
but it doesn't have a wet mouth, or it's not leaving. Okay, I might just come and see you, because I like to come and see you and put some money in your pocket. You know, that's my favorite. It's my favorite thing to do. You know, go and see the vet, burn some cash.
I got a question for myself.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Years ago, a fella in America, they were looking at doing genetic sequencing for like monitors, blue tongues. So it was a way that you send a scale into this place, and they could tell you by the sequencing if it was male or female.
Yep.
Has that been, because you can do it with birds here in Australia, has that happened with reptiles, or has that been looked into?
Absolutely been looked into. So what you have to understand is that the way that sex determination occurs in reptiles is very different to what happens in birds. Birds is very easy. And so that the DNA point of view, that's quite simple. So in the US, I think you can get iguanas, and I'm going to say one of the monitor species over there, they've cracked the code and doing it. That is being worked on in blue-tongue lizards, and maybe in the next 12 to 18 months, we might have something on the horizon for that. So it's definitely looking at, and the theory would be exactly what you said there, is either taking a swab or a shed of skin and sending it in and actually having it sexed. DNA sexing in reptiles is the holy grail. Being able to actually take a day-old blue-tongue lizard and take a swab from the mouth and get that sexed at that time.
That's
and then if they're all males, you sell them as females.
Females.
I can't sex them, but you can have them for a special price. Yeah.
So
after? Oh, this is definitely a girl.
So you just cross out the certificate. So it will come. The technology.
It's still happening.
It's still happening. There's definitely. I can absolutely 100% tell you there are definitely people looking at it. Because we have looked into those sort of things as well. So, there's a buck too late on it. So,
but they're doing that overseas. They're doing that in the US, though, aren't they? I think they are.
I think they can do green iguanas, for example, but I'm going to say that it's not 100% accurate all the time, which makes it, if it's going to be, if it's not
a small monitor species, they'll look.
Yeah, I think there is a couple of monitors
or something like that.
Yeah. So there's definite, and you also got to realize in the reptile world, we've got animals that are parthenogenic, so can produce, so
Komodos,
sexing and all that sort of stuff, and you've got temperature dependent sexing, you've got genetic sexing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are going to be certain, there's so many variables
that
are involved in that. It's bloody complicated. So.
But live bearing lizards would be gene linked though, the sex, wouldn't
it? You would think yes.
Did I almost catch this bet?
I'm probably going to have to go and look at the books, but logically it would make sense because your temperature dependent is the egg sitting there, and depending on temperature the egg is.
Cycle the eggs at different temperatures.
Temperatures, Crocs are the classic example of that. So, but the live bearers, but then you throw the live bearers in, and it's the live bearers that are parthenogenic. You got females.
Because you get boas do that as well. Yeah, boas can have.
Boas, and I'm going to say this week there was a report of Komodo dragons in one of the zoos in the US producing, a clutch of babies without a male present. So, how does that work? That's pretty scary stuff. So.
There's something. There was Ben Morrill. I think Benson Morrill. He's a geneticist from over in the US. I'm pretty sure they do DNA sex testing for snakes and pythons and stuff. I think it's like 20. It's like $20 or $30.
Yeah, there's a DNA sexing lab. And I've actually still in my freezer at work. I actually have samples from blue tongue lizard that I was doing some work with, and I was in contact with him, but we had a lot of difficulty being able to get the samples out of Australia to him. I had a case of what I think was a parthenogenic blue tongue lizard. And so I've been trying to do that for years, and I've still got the samples, but I've just never been able to get through the paperwork to get the samples that he needs over to the US. So it's a bit frustrating.
I've never been with a male or anything and had babies.
Yeah.
Tell me, just so people also know, I mean, this is something that a lot of guys might not know. So if you have a snake that died at home, what would be the best way to look after? So this is stuff that I know, but I'm asking you just because a lot of people. So if you had a snake that died and you wanted to get tested or checked, what's the best way? If you can't get to the vet straight away, what's the best way to preserve that specimen?
Yeah. Number one is do not freeze it.
Yeah.
All right. So just stick it in a garbage bag and stick it in the fridge, preferably a fridge with no food in it, but put it in the fridge. Don't freeze it, because what happens is when we get the body, when we actually do the necropsy on it and we take the tissue samples, some of those tissue samples we're going to want to send off to the lab to get a test done called histopathology, where they fix the tissue and look at under the microscope. When you freeze those samples, the ice crystals form and they destroy the tissues, and it renders that tissue useless. We can't do anything. We can still do DNA testing. We still do virus testing on a frozen animal. That's easy, but we can't do the histopathology testing. And that's the first thing that we do. So don't freeze an animal. Always just put them in the fridge and cool them down, and then and try and get to us. You know, 4 days is probably about as maximum. After 4 days, the tissues have started to degenerate to a point where it stinks to high heaven when doing the postmortem, but the second one is the tissues aren't that great anymore. So but you can keep an animal in a fridge for 4 or 5 days and then get it to a vet for a postmortem. And then we'll open it up and we'll look and we'll see, is there something obvious? Is there a tumour or an abscess or something like that? And if there's nothing there that's obvious, then that's when we take the tissue samples and send those off to the lab.
But I always said that it's if you've got a large collection and something just turns over and dies, if it was something that was like just a heart that stopped, or it's stuff that those things you can see. But if it's something more sinister, it's always better to just get the test done and just see, at least cover your bases. That might be the perfect time to strike when the iron's hot. If something comes back, you could alter your system to prevent further spread or whatever.
You just look at what zoos do. An animal dies in a zoo. Every one of those animals that dies in a zoo gets a full postmortem and a full workup done, because what they want to do is make sure that there's not something in their collection that's going to wipe out everything. And that doesn't matter whether it's an elephant that dies right through to a stick insect. They will postmortem everything, and we should take that and put it into our private collection situation. And yes, it costs money to do that, but if you're going to have these animals and certainly going to have larger collections and breed from it, again, that you should be budgeting for this sort of stuff to happen and have the economics to cover for it. And that's not just me being a vet saying I want to get paid for stuff. That's just, you should have that. It's silly not to have that in place.
Okay, so Shane, thank you very much. I think we've gone for 2 hours. I think we had there's a information overload. Your smart ass comments as usual.
The same things, but many years ago we did something like this, and I think it went for about the same length of time too. So lots to talk about. So if we survive, I'm sure we will survive the corona threat. I still have the venue booked for the conference, the Carpet Fest. But I'm tipping it's going to be postponed till later in the year. So I know that we'll see what weekend we can fit in though. But I know you said that you'd come and do a talk there. So we'll dig some more into that stuff at the Carpet Fest. Please tell people where they can get a hold of you. Give yourself a little plug and just tell people where they can find you and get a hold of you if they need to get a hold of you. Yeah, so I'm based at the Unusual Pet Vets, which is in Frankston, and you can get us on our website, unusualpetvets.com.au, or we've got a pretty active Facebook page, so we'll give the clinic a call on 8738-3210. We've also, for those of us not in Melbourne, we've got practice in Brisbane. Josh up there is right into his reptiles. We've also got 2 practices over in Perth, based at Balcatta and at the Murdoch Uni. So we've got most of the states covered, one of my vets that works for me can certainly help you out.
And if he's not local yet, he'll be coming to a city close to
Coming
you
to
soon.
a city near you, yeah. Yeah, it's funny when we opened Brisbane, we had so many people contact us and say, "Where's your next one open? You should open one on the Sunshine Coast." And we had somebody saying, "I should open one out in bloody Whoop Whoop type sort of thing." There's like 4 people lived out there. He goes, "Dude, it costs $1 million to open a vet clinic. I just can't pull one that much straight away."
Yeah, just pull it out of my ass.
And you can, I mean, you can cover everything. I mean, we've done so many things. We've done ultrasonography. You've got the best equipment there. Like that's something that I've, like you can ultrasound and tell people if eggs have got blood. You can tell people if reptile eggs are still viable inside of the feed. This is stuff that I've only seen at your practice. Different. You can see different colored blood. Like oxygenated and non-oxygenated blood. It's an experience because the good. Now I'm gonna give you a plug. The best thing about you and the way you conduct yourself in that business of yours is that you explain to people what you're doing while you're doing it, and it gives them a better understanding of what they just paid for. And it's not just about the money. Like I like to walk out of it. Maybe it's just me, but I like to walk out after I saw you with an animal and understand why you did those processes. And it's something that you talk people through the whole thing. You don't just say, look, you have to pay this much to get this done. You literally stand there, you show them how you do the bloods. Maybe it's just me that you show. I don't know. Maybe I'm just, I'm setting a new precedent here for you, But like of all the stuff we've done, you've always had, you've shown, I got some tips when I was dabbling in the ultrasonography and stuff, though my systems were like a fraction of the stuff that the machines that you use, but it's professional grade ultrasound units that you have, and then all the others under the microscope. You showed videos. You gave me X-rays. It's a great service that you've got there, and I think people need to take advantage of that expertise and get a better understanding of what's going on with their animals.
Yeah, no, look, a lot of it's education, and it's just getting across that. One, there's vets like myself and others that know what we're talking about, and and look, and we've had this discussion before. Is I don't sit here and say I know everything about reptiles because God don't. Particularly when it comes to breeding, that sort of stuff. I've never bred a reptile in my life. I refer to the guys like yourselves and that sort of thing, and I'll sit there and I'll listen to what you say, and then I can take that in and utilize that in practice. But when it comes to the medical point of view, I'm the one with the training on it, and so. I can answer those sort of questions, but I'm not going to tell you how to look after your animals from a breeding type sort of point of view because that's not my area of expertise. But if you get an egg-bound snake, I can fix that for you. So that's a whole different ballgame. But we try and educate. We try and part of it's the experience. The equipment is not cheap. We're hopefully in the next 12 months we're going to put a CT scanner in down at our Melbourne practice. That's $300,000.
Oh.
But it's going to revolutionise the way that we do things.
You better take out the whip and start beating those slaves that work for you down there.
I got a pretty good team. We got a pretty good team, but it's just, but that's what's happening now. It's just that sort of stuff is happening.
But that's what people need now. Like it's advanced now.
They expect it. They expect it. They think, well, I can get a CT scan. Why can't I get my guinea pig CT scan? We got a guinea pig. We're using a specialist hospital at the moment for scanning.
I sometimes look at some of the photos you post of rats and rabbits and stuff, and I go, why? but there are people that love those pets like it's their children. A rat. I saw the other day somebody had a rat with a big abscess on it, and I used to just look at those rats, and I just take those rats and just chuck a big abscess. That's extra food for the snake, and just chuck them in there. But there's people
somebody's baby. I remember I walked out of the waiting room one day, and there was a lady sitting there. She had a pet rat. Sitting next to her was a woman with a fully grown olive python.
Yeah.
Next to her was a guinea pig. Next to her was a person with a blue and gold.
Oh man!
And they were all sitting in the waiting room together, and I just stood there and went, "This is pretty cool."
It's pretty eclectic.
Yeah, it's just nuts what we get through the door sometimes. And you got the rat person talking to the snake person as their best mates, and you're thinking, hang on, if one of them gets out here, you're going to lose one type sort of thing. So it's interesting.
On my travels, I see things, and the best thing I saw in recent times is I went into a veterinarian practice the other day, and there was a bowl of water sitting on the floor for dogs to drink when they get thirsty. And I was like, I couldn't understand why you would have a bowl of water sitting in a practice where sick dogs could come in, drink out of that bowl, and the next dog. I know. I mean, it probably came from a good place. You know, a lot of people don't understand it that way. But what a way to make it.
Stuff.
Actually, you're making you know not. These guys are just making their next patients. You know, like they're making sure that the whatever.
Just spreading kennel cough around. That's all we want to do is deal with kennel cough.
It's crazy. But look, I thank you. I really appreciate your time, mate. I owe you one. Like I owe you a few actually.
Yeah, we're going a lot. That's all right. That's cool.
And I wish you all the luck with this virus and stuff, and working through that, and with all your practices and all the plans you've got. You know, I might have to come and check out the seat. I might have to bring that. I might see you before. I might have to come and bring you that lizard. You know,
You better bring that.
Coming in.
I might just raise the temperature of that lizard because it's sitting there with the rest. But when you said those bubbles, it's something that I noticed that I went, that's odd, but maybe it could be because it's shedding so much. But I'll have to have a look at that. But thank you.
Yeah.
I think I think a lot of people, we've had a lot of people say thank you for the show. It's been a great show and very
Excellent.
informative and stuff. And I mean, that's why I got you on here, is because I know that you'd hear things from you that you wouldn't hear anywhere else. So
I appreciate it. So,
mate, I'm just gonna finish the show off, and then I'll quickly say just have a chat to you afterwards. So don't go anywhere. And
will do.
I just wanted to say thanks for. Let me just jump to the other camera here. Sorry, Carl. I'll see you soon. Thanks,
All right,
Colin.
mate.
Thanks for manning the questions. Let me just jump. Thank you everybody for watching the show tonight. It's always a pleasure seeing the many questions that come in and the friendly banter that goes on. I'll see you guys next. I don't know if we'll do a show next Friday. We've had Friday night shows every week now since the beginning of the year, and I thought maybe it's time to take a break, but we'll see how we go. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you next.